JJ Part 1. Hello, my name is Joseph Ryan, JJ for short. I am from Memphis, Tennessee, and I work here in Colorado Springs at CSDB, Colorado School for the Deaf and Blind, and I work as a guidance counselor. So I was born deaf. My parents were both hearing. And I grew up reading how to learn read lips. I didn't learn sign until I was 18 years old. So when I was growing up, my parents met many different people with different backgrounds and specialties involving deafness, and they told a lot of people influenced my parents to let me speech read, and I started to read lips since I was 2, doing speech classes and everything. And then I went to this one oral school, and then I went to this other school called St. Joseph Institute for the Deaf. And I was at that school. I had a lot of friends. Most of them were deaf, but they didn't sign, so it was kind of an interesting challenge, interesting dynamic. But I did enjoy my time there, meeting all those deaf peers just like me. And I was able to work through speech training, and my parents still talk in the house. They don't sign. It's not a signing environment. And I've seen that I can understand most everyone in my family. So, I graduated, or when I finished 8th grade at that school, I went back to my hometown in Tennessee to go to a different high school. And that was completely different. Everyone was hearing. They didn't follow like deaf education. It was, more of a regular type of mainstream school. So I was put into there. I wasn't alone, actually, though. I did have some deaf friends, and which was nice for me. I had familiar faces there. And I know everything is different. When I arrived at high school, I realized everything was different. I didn't really know anyone. No one was the same. Sorry, at the deaf school is where I had all those deaf peers, and at this high school I was really alone. I didn't have any hearing peers, so I missed out a lot in high school. I was always put in the front of the class. Everyone behind me was talking. At the deaf school there was about 5 or 6 kids in like a half circle formation, so the communication was a lot easier to manage. But at this hearing school, I didn't know who was talking, or who what was being said. Since it was in a more of a row type setting, and the teacher would, I had to try to read the teacher's lips during the lecture, but that was difficult for me because sometimes they were facing the whiteboard or whatever. So, it seemed like, I got the experience from that deaf school, but then at this hearing high school, the experience was completely opposite. But at the high school, I was fortunate enough to have teachers that I had a good relationship with. They took the time to build that relationship with me. I did struggle in class, but I really tried my hardest. I tried to keep up with all of my other hearing peers. I tried to keep my grades up. I was lucky for me. I was also involved in sports, and my passion was definitely sports. I loved soccer, football, basketball, most of all soccer. That's what I loved to do in high school. And that was where, I could really show my strengths. And if I'm going to be honest, I didn't really participate in class. I was a lot more quiet. I didn't feel that there was that real connection in the classroom. the deaf school, though, I was very involved. I was active in class, uh, but in high school, that was good enough for me with the sports aspect of it. That's where I would tend to be involved mostly. Um, I love building that relationship with those teachers, and I believe that I really could do it. So junior year, oh man, I was so looking forward to graduating. Next year was my senior year. Oh man, I was just so relieved and ready to be done with high school. So I went to another hearing environment, um, you know, at, at the hearing high school, but then I transferred to this college in Kentucky, and my first class had 400 students in this giant auditorium, and it was a sociology class, and I remember, I had no interpreter in high school. In college, I thought it was going to be kind of the same struggle, and so I went a month without an interpreter. Same as high school. I tried to bear through it, and it just was not. It was evident that it wasn't successful, and I saw that my grades were suffering. So finally, I decided to go to the disabilities office over at this college. Oh, in Tennessee, not Kentucky, sorry. Before that, my dad encouraged me um, to try to follow the rules, but I realized, that there was these support systems that I had. So I went ahead and went to the office and talked with them and asked what services they could provide. They said, they could do an interpreter, a note taker. So they explained everything to me. And I said, oh, a note taker, yeah, that'll be great. And that's pretty much all I want. So I said, okay, you don't want an interpreter? And I said, I've never used an interpreter. I don't know how to manage that. So they showed me a demo DVD, and they told me, and I told them that I wasn't comfortable using sign language. Um, but then I decided I wanted to take up an ASL class. So they put me into one ASL class, and I started picking up sign. They provided an interpreter for that class. And wow, I realized that I was gaining so much more information compared to before, that I was learning so much and I was becoming so motivated. In high school, I realized that I was missing out on so much without an interpreter. With the sign language and access to communication that way, and having other deaf peers there to help me in my sign language skills, my skills started to develop, and I started socializing more, becoming more confident as compared to before when I was younger. You know, I didn't have that access, but in Tennessee, I met a lot of hearing students and deaf students alike. Most of them were deaf, and I loved socializing with them more so. I didn't never realize that with an interpreter, I gained so much more information, so much more access to information that I didn't have before. So I thought that was very beneficial. So after college, I decided what I wanted to do. I decided to go to Gallaudet University, and it was a completely different world for me as well. Full signing environment, full access to communication everywhere. And it was definitely I felt like it was a deaf or a full circle for my life. I went to a deaf elementary school, middle school. I went to hearing high school. College was kind of a mixture of the two. And then in Gallaudet, it was completely deaf, all use of sign language. I got involved with um, different agencies and sports as well at Gallaudet. So at Gallaudet, I decided to get my major in counseling. I really want to work with deaf people, particularly in schools or even maybe the community. I wasn't quite sure yet. But then finally I realized I really loved school, and that's why I'm here at CSDB, and I've been here for 12 years now. And I just absolutely love my job. I love the environment here. So I meet a lot of deaf kids here. There's a lot of different backgrounds and experiences. but they're all very true and genuine. So I love working here. So for me, I think that keeping up an attitude, a positive attitude, is important. I feel like the attitude of, oh, I can't. I feel like I'm not going to be able to do that. I won't have the opportunities. If you don't try, then you will never be able to do it. So yes, there are some challenges, out in the real world with, there's dangers and everything, but go ahead and try it. You'll never know if you like it or if you don't, and you can't say that you don't like it if you don't at least try. So my advice for a lot of people is you say, you won't know if you like something unless you try. That's definitely my perspective. So here's the big question. A lot of people are asking what's it like to be deaf or hard of hearing? And I don't really know the experience to be hard of hearing, but being deaf for me, it's all about your mind. It's not about hearing everything. It's not even about that you have to hear, about being a benefit. But being big deaf, that culture, that group, there's definitely that connection that anywhere you go, let's say you could visit Washington State, for example. You meet some deaf people there that you've never met before. But as soon as you start chatting with that group, you make that instant connection based off of your other connections elsewhere, and I think that's just a really cool experience. And oftentimes hearing people, they don't really understand that, they don't get it, and they never will. But deaf people will always have that realization and that innate feeling of connectiveness out in the real world. My parents, they have always supported me when I was younger, and today they see me with all my deaf friends, meeting so many different deaf people who use sign language, and they definitely see the difference, and they're so amazed to see that I more humorous. I laugh more. There's definitely more socializing, and I'm not left out as often. And I definitely think that's important.